Hello there. Welcome to Penarth Archery Club's YouTube channel. My name is Jeremy. This is another video in the series Archery The Basics. I've already put together and published several videos in the series, one being in three parts, which is buying your first bow, and another entitled Assembling Your Arrows. This video series, Archery The Basics, is not meant to be expert or definitive on the various subjects, but just some ideas, advice, and general guidance in a central resource library to help our members. They then don't have to go online searching for this content and trying to decide what information to follow, as there's so much out there. So following on from the first videos regarding buying your first bow, this video is about what is needed to be done to complete the setup of the bow before the new archer starts shooting. So the video will be aimed at showing the static setup of the bow, in that it is not dealing with any bow tuning when shooting as such, but assembling the bow and correctly setting up some parts of the equipment. A very good source of information on the setup of recurve and compound bows, together with a very detailed description of bow tuning and all the elements of setting up a bow, is contained in the Eastern Arrow Tuning and Maintenance Guide, which can be downloaded at easternarchery.com. Eastern supplying various arrows throughout the world, so it would be a useful download to have available. We will be looking at just the actual bow and its attachments here. First we will look at an ILF Olympic style recurve bow. So the archer has the correct length recurve bow with the agreed weight limbs and the various add-ons needed. So first we would assemble the basic bow, put the ILF limbs into the riser, get the string and a stringer and string the bow. Put on whatever bow rest is being used, put a pressure button in just as it was received, as we will set it up correctly later in the process. Use a brace height gauge and see what the brace height is showing. Brace height is the measure of the distance between the bowstring when strung and the throat of the grip of the bow. Nowadays I usually measure the distance to the center of the pressure button screw thread or pressure button tip itself if it's fitted. Limb manufacturers usually specify the recommended brace height range for their limbs, but that is often when fitted to one of their own make risers. As we can be mixing and matching different makes of risers and limbs, we can take this as general guidance and work from there. So say we have a 68-inch bow, the brace height range can actually be from 8 inches to 9¼ inches. However, most recommend starting somewhere between 8½ inches to 9 inches. I would usually recommend that it be set at 8¾ inches to start and work from there. If we are dealing with say a 66-inch bow or a 70-inch bow, then the brace height range and the starting point will be slightly different. Brace height measurements and maintaining that height when shooting the bow is an important element of both the static setup of the bow and also when the bow is being shot. That's where we move into the dynamic setup of the bow, where we are looking at the arrow/bow performance when the shot is made. The brace height determines when the arrow actually leaves the string during the shot, and so affects the performance of the arrow by determining at what stage the arrow is flexing against the pressure button. Brace height affects arrow speed, usually faster at a lower height, slightly slower at a higher height. It also affects the overall performance of the bow in respect of the feel of the draw cycle and smoothness and noise of the bow when shot, and also the grouping of the arrows. We usually set it more towards a higher setting, looking for a quiet sounding bow when actually shot. There are ways of accurately determining the best brace height for an archer bow combination, but that is for another video on another day. We will twist the string to obtain the brace height we are looking for, where we reduce the number of twists in the string to increase the string length and lower the brace height, or put in more twist to shorten the string and increase the brace height. Here, the two-tone strings prove very useful in that an archer can see which way and how many twists are in the string. Here are several shots of one of our training bows with different brace heights. You can see the lower brace height by the low number of twists in the string and the relative shallow bend of the limbs. Compare that to the higher brace heights where there are far more twists in the string and the limbs are drawn further from the riser. These are good visuals to keep in mind, as you can often see where an archer has a brace height that may need looking at. Once we settle on the initial brace height to start, say 8 3/4 inches for a 68-inch bow, then we move on to looking at the tiller measurements. Tiller is the horizontal measurement from where the limbs meet the riser to the string at both ends of the riser. It is the spatial relationship between the limbs and riser, affecting how each limb is drawn in relation to each other. The main consideration is the placing of the fingers above and or below the arrow. Drawing a bow with a split finger placement of the index finger above and middle ring fingers below the arrow creates a different draw stress on each of the limbs. Similarly, if you're drawing 3 fingers under, changes the dynamics of the drawn limbs. This is where we try to compensate for this unequal drawing pressure by adjusting the tiller setting. The setting of the limb bolts on the riser determines the tiller measurement by moving the limbs in or out on the riser. Tiller does not heavily influence the feel or performance of the bow for archers at this beginning level. Many new and less experienced archers would not be able to tell any difference if the tiller was altered. It does become more of a factor when we're looking at bare bow shooting where 3 fingers are under the arrow. At this initial stage, the general way forward when shooting split finger style Olympic recurve is to have a slightly longer distance at the top of the riser compared to the bottom. 4 to 8 millimeters is fine. It is the difference in measurement that counts, not the actual distance. This is called positive tiller. If there was no difference in measurement between top and bottom, that would be neutral tiller, and if the bottom measurement was larger than the top, then that would be negative tiller. So we are looking for 4 to 8 millimeters of positive tiller. If adjustment is needed, then the limb bolts on the riser are used. Here I have put the riser in a bike holder bracket, which is useful for this purpose, and where, having measured the tiller, have found that the top and bottom measurements were equal. This is called neutral tiller. It can be suitable for a bare bow setup, but for sighted recurve we would like to go with positive tiller. You can see that we use the limb bolts to alter the angle of the limbs to alter the tiller. For a bare bow archer, we would suggest using neutral tiller as a starting point due to the way the limbs react when using the 3 finger under the arrow draw. So to continue with the ILF recurve sighted setup with the handle held securely, you need to release the lock-in screw which is recessed into the riser, which locks each limb bolt to prevent unwanted changes. So we need to release that screw to enable us to alter the limb bolts, which will then allow us to bring the limbs in and out as required. This is the same process as if you were looking to either increase or decrease the actual draw weight of the bow. For tiller adjustment, so as not to affect the draw weight of the bow, you would need to alter each bolt slightly in opposite directions to get the tiller measurements correct. So, for example, say a quarter turn out on the upper bolt and a quarter turn in on the lower bolt. This would give a positive tiller setting by allowing the top limb to be further from the string and the bottom limb closer to the string. We then lock the limb bolt set screws, restring the bow, and make sure you have the correct setting that you want. Once the tiller is set, Check the brace height is correct just to be sure. We can then sort out putting some temporary knock locators on the bowstring. I tend to use some tape for this, as we will put on some permanent knock sets later. The red and yellow bowstring I'm using here has brass knock sets already in place. I've left them on as they're not fully tightened and can be adjusted easily. I would replace them with tied-on knocking points at a later stage, the same if using tape knocking points. So using the brace height gauge, attach it to the string, set the bottom of the gauge on the arrow rest. We usually shoot with the knock of the arrow being slightly above level, say 7 to 10 millimeters. This promotes better arrow clearance of the rest and pressure button and flight of the arrow. Put some tape to mark this, or twist the brass knock sets up into position. Then use an arrow to set the space between the bottom and top knock set to end up with 2 temporary brass or tape knocking points. The knock sets need to be snug to the arrow knock, but not clamping the arrow knock in place, as the string will be at an angle at full draw. We do need to look at limb alignment. This is where we are checking that the bowstring lines up with the middle of the bow grip and the middle of the limbs when viewed from behind. Using the bike holder clamp makes this pretty straightforward to do. There are adjustments that can be made on the riser to move the limbs to bring the string into the correct alignment, and these are described in the riser manual. The system uses small grub screws set into the side of the riser level with the limb inserts. The screws can be used to move the small holder in the limb pocket, which the limbs click into. By making small adjustments, it allows us to move the limbs slightly from side to side to bring a limb, and hence the string, into the right alignment. It's best to have someone experienced to look at this with you for a second opinion. They can also look at the limb tips to ensure they are not twisted. So looking at the actual tip of the limb to be in line with the bowstring and not pulled to one side. Once you are happy with the brace height, tiller, alignment to the limbs and strings, then it's worthwhile just checking what the draw weight of the bow actually is. Limbs are usually measured at the 28-inch draw length, but different limb riser combinations can alter this, and where adjustments have been made in respect of the tiller also. So using bow weight scales to draw the bow to the archer's draw length will give a definitive draw weight. These are a typical set of bow scales which are widely available these days. This particular model is useful as it shows both full draw weight and holding weight. This enables compound archers to see their let-off in operation, as the holding weight will be significantly lighter than the draw weight, and gives an exact figure for let-off percentage calculations. For the recurve, if the weight is more or less than expected, then releasing the limb bolt set screws and adjusting the bolts in to increase weight, out to decrease weight can be done. This is the same process as we followed to alter tiller. In this case, we alter the limbs the same amount, either into the bow to increase draw weight or out from the bow to decrease draw weight. The manufacturers advise the limit of adjustment, how many turns of the bolts, which should be adhered to. So then we can tighten everything up, recheck brace height, tiller and draw weight to make sure all is okay. At this stage, we would be looking to establish the center shot of the bow by aligning the arrow with the bowstring, both for recurves and compound. So we'll take a break here, as that is quite a detailed process. I will pick up on this in the second video, part 2 of basic bow setup. So I hope these videos will help archers start to understand their equipment a bit better, and also give them some detail and insight about the mechanics of the bow and how the elements of the setup are needed to get the best performance out of the bow and arrow combination. As always, it would be appreciated if you found this video useful. You could hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I'll be back soon with the second video on basic bow setup to finally complete the setup of the bow. Thank you for watching.